many of us here have ever tried to write our names on computers and it gives us an entirely different suggestion from what our name is, and we're asking, should I be this? I remember one time I tried typing my name on my laptop and I typed Cookey, and it kept suggesting cool kid, cool kid. And I was like, I don't say I'm cool now, but come on, computer, nobody say I define with this, And this brings me to our topic for today, which is art and cultivating our identities. I will just borrow a popular quote from Greek philosophy, which says, "Man, know thyself." Or in pidgin English, "Sabi who you be o." Now, what is identity? According to good old Google, identity is the fact of being who or what a person is. Now, moving on, I want to tell you guys a very short story. First of all, I've never had a 9-to-5 job. I've always done art and architecture together. But I did not start my entrepreneurship like this. I started it from way back during my teenage age. So when I was much younger, I had this business I used to run with my cousin. And actually, it started like a joke. My dad loves reading newspapers. So he would buy a lot of newspapers, and then we'll have like a huge stock at home. And I'll take the newspaper. And one day, we decided to take these newspapers to the guy who sells suya in my area. For those of you who don't know, suya is smoked spice meat, and it's one of my favorite things to eat. So we took the newspapers to the guy, and we thought he was going to give us money. And the guy was like, "No, these are outdated. He can't give us money since he's just using them for suya." So we said, "Okay, you give us the suya." And I said, "Okay, yes." So we started our business like that. And every weekend, we'll pack newspaper and go and give to the guy, and he'll give us suya. And this business continued for a very long time. But shockingly, it never occurred to me to read any of those papers. I would just pack them like that and go and give to the guy and collect suya like that. And it kept on happening. And one day, trust me, never be so bored to the extent that you have to just sit down and start reading old newspapers, because the informations are like 6-7 months ago. So you don't know what you're doing with it, but you're just bored. You want to keep your eyes active. So that day I decided to read this newspaper. And my eyes caught a headline. It says, "Britain returns stolen Berlin bronze to Nigeria." And I'll call that my moment of truth, because I became curious about a lot of things as I was just starting my art career. Now, why I became curious about that is that I think curiosity is really the first step to cultivating one's identity. This is because generally as Nigerians, we are very agreeable people. And not just Nigerians, Africans in general. We always accept everything that is being imported from the West. In fact, here we used to have unglamorized popular sayings like, "Obey as you're told," "Do am, no they complain." And they would also be priding themselves and be telling you, "Just do am, now waiting they do for that side." We are too used to having quotes like this that we've just become too agreeable as a people. Now let me take it back to the news about the Benin bronze sculptures. According to BritishMuseum.org, these Benin bronze sculptures were stolen from Nigeria. And I discovered that one of the most integral parts of colonization was identity theft. And this identity theft was not done gun blazing. It was done by simply convincing us that our culture was a taboo, our religion was evil, and the values that we hold dear to ourselves was inferior. The Benin bronze sculptures were taken away from this country because they were considered evil as at that time. These sculptures were commissioned in honor of the ancestral altars of the Oba of Benin and Queen monarchs. They used these sculptures during ritual ceremony to also commemorate the ascension on the throne of a new Oba or of a new queen. But when the foreigners came, they made them believe that these were deities, and they took it away from them. I'm going to move to the east because I schooled in Enugu. In the east, we have a popular art form called Uli art. Uli art is usually done on mud houses and on bodies of women and children during ceremonial rituals. And then the men will also decorate their body with Uli art when they want to wrestle. This art form started in Anambra State, and then it was made popular by Nsukka artists from my proud school, University of Nigeria, Nsukka, just to put that out there. And This uli art currently has been modernized due to foreign influence into what we now know as motif murals and tattoos. Also, moving to the western part of Nigeria, Dada, or dreadlocks as they are popularly known, has been existing for a long time, and it has been popular in the western part of Nigeria. But with the emergence of Christianity, this hairstyle was abolished and was made evil because the foreigners and the Christian missionaries made them believe that children born with these hairstyles were descendants of certain lesser gods. And so these children were condemned to the service of certain deities. And it was also believed that for these children to be reintegrated back into the society, they needed to cut this hair or undergo spiritual cleansing, which we now know as deliverance. Now, I just want to ask us a simple question. What exactly has changed? And I'm going to tell you what has changed today. What has changed is what we popularly know today as Japa culture, or migration, as we would have it. Although I don't call it migration because I think when you're migrating, you need to be going to somewhere, and then you also have to be going to where people also want you. But now it's Japa because it's more like escaping, where Africans can go on high sea and die just because they are going for greener pastures. But coincidentally, this has changed a lot of things because now Africans now have the ability to exchange their culture, take out their experiences, tell their story by themselves, and actually have the world understand them better. And this is why today, Afrobeat genre of music is the best and widely accepted music genre right now in the world, because we've been able to export this music, this sound, while maintaining our language, maintaining our beats, and also maintaining our dance steps without Western influences. I make hyper-realistic portraits and figurative paintings. For those of us who don't know, hyper-realistic drawings are pictures that look more lifelike or even as real as photographs. In my works, I embellish these portraits and figurative paintings with backgrounds from traditional wrapper material. And I got this inspiration from a popular culture in my place and in neighboring communities. I'm from Opobo in Rivers State, and we have a popular culture called Iria Mbede. It is popular with the Ibani people, Opobo, Boni, Kalabari, and the neighboring communities. In this culture, there's a ceremonial rite which is done for our women. And this ceremonial rite is called tying of wrapper, where the woman ties different colorful wrappers and keeps going in and out and coming out of the house. And this culture and ceremonial rite is reserved for women to show the transition of childhood to childbearing and marriage age. Until you complete this culture in my place, you're not considered a complete human. And that is why they call it initiation to humanhood. Once you complete this culture, then you are now allowed to participate in social and political activities in my place. In 2020, I had the rare privilege and the rare opportunity of working with Dimas Woko. Dimas Woko is a Pan-Africanist. He's an architect, he's a designer, he's a visual artist. In fact, that man has contested for presidency before, so I'm not sure there's anything the guy has not done. And being a young 22-year-old boy, I went to work with an 87-year-old man. And the experience was life-changing, because this is an African man that truly believes in Africa, and a man that believes that Africa should solve its problem by themselves and not constantly rely on copying and pasting solutions from the West. I remember back then in my architecture school days at the University of Nigeria, we had this course called building materials, and they would always teach us about different types of materials used for buildings. And on one of those lectures, my lecturer was telling us that we switched from using casement windows. Casement windows are windows that are openable in two ways, where you can open the two fins of the window. And he told us that we switched from that to sliding windows in the early 70s. And I asked him why. Because casement windows allowed 90% of opening for air and light, but sliding windows only allow 50% for air and then 50% for light. And do you know what his reply was? I was like, Ibim, learn this thing. I've told you that it's part of your scheme. And I was like, you safe, like, you don't know why we are doing it. And then I discovered that a lot of the solutions that we copy from the West, we don't really know why we're using it here. We just copy it because it's what is trending or because they've used it there and it's working for them. Now, this is why working with Dimas was very interesting, because Dimas has created a niche for himself. This is Dimas' building, a Dominican chapel, Ibadan, built in the 1970s. And this was regarded as one of the most iconic places of worship up till today because of how Dimas designed it. Dimas believes in sustainable architecture and passive architecture. Let me just give you an example. I've been sitting here now for about 2 hours, and I've been so cold, and I'm sure most of us here were cold. But have you ever wondered how this place would be if the ACs were shut down and we only had to depend on the windows or natural ventilation? It would be almost impossible to stay here. And who brought this idea of air conditions? Who brought these ideas of having big, big engines in a country where we don't have stable power supply? Who brought this idea of constantly depending on fans to ventilate our environments? How did our forefathers live? How did they stay in mud houses comfortably without air conditions? And they lived even much longer than we are now. Now, Dimas believes that this is achievable even in the present day. And this is why in Dimas's architecture, he imbibes the same thing by believing that we should stop this importation of Western building materials and start manufacturing and developing our local products. This is Dimas's house in Idumeje, Uboko, Delta State, Nigeria, built in the early 70s. This house is a very iconic structure. I remember when I was with Dimas, Al Jazeera came all the way from the Middle East to come and interview this building and tell us and allow us to tell them about the design. I'm going to use this building to illustrate what passive design and architecture is to you. In this building, Dimas used bricks, which he got from laterites, which were gotten from excavation of the soil. In this same building, Dimas used wood for the windows. He used wood for the floors, and this wood were gotten during falling of trees for construction. Dimas finished these walls in interior and exterior by using laterites and granites locally sourced. This building does not have an air condition, and fans are not used in this building, and they've survived from the 1970s till now, and they cool all year in and all year out. And this is because Dimas has controlled air in this building by using high and low vents. In this same building, Dimas has ensured that he's been able to use what they call an impluvium. Impluvium was something that was common in ancient Roman architecture. These are openings from rooftops which allow light and water to come in from building. And the reason why this is a solution in Nigeria, because in a lot of communities, they do not have clean water, and so water is very scarce. This impluvium collects water from the sky and then gathers it for use in the house and also for gardening. Again, like Dimas would say, Africa needs to develop its identity in architecture. And the only way we can do that is by developing structures and making designs with our own locally sourced material. In 2018, I visited South Africa, Johannesburg. And I was in their residential area, and it looks exactly like Lekki, without exaggeration. For those of us who travel to Lagos all the time, if you're in Lekki and someone makes a video inside or outside a house or an estate, and someone else posts that thing online, you can't tell that this is Nigeria. If you visit the Oriental Hotel, you think you're in China. If you visit Chinatown in Lagos, you think you're in China. If you go to Abuja, you would see that Cairo, Egypt, is an exact reflection of Abuja. And you can see with the two central mosques being posted side by side. Lagos State looks like South Africa, England, and part of China. And so is Rivers State and a lot of other states in Nigeria. And this is because we have refused to think for ourselves and provide solutions for ourselves. So we keep taking designs, copying them, and mirroring them. I'm going to be concluding on this note, that as the world continues to evolve in terms of technology, in terms of infrastructural development, and in terms of artificial intelligence, Africa must embrace these changes in an Afrocentric way by making sure that we accept these changes and also have an input of our culture and values in them. And I would like to say this. And this is my own quote, so I'm not referencing anybody. Until Africa begins to think for itself, the world will continue to think for Africa and provide solutions for Africa to copy. I hope that with this talk today, you will be more observant of your environment and the surrounding around you, and even your outfits that you wear. And say, ask yourself this question: is this truly my identity? Or am I just copying what I've seen online or what I've seen other people do? And I hope you'll be able to do this. Thank you.